Rebecca and Carls are here from Pandion today, and Serona Elton's here from the MLC. We're really excited to get chatting with her. I just want to do a little introduction to Pandion, like usual, before we start. Just to get us started off, Pandion Music Foundation is a new nonprofit 501c3 that we started about October of last year and just got our license in January for the 501c3, which is really exciting. And we've been running these weekly workshops with different mentors each week to help break down the barriers between emerging artists and industry professionals and make access to resources free for artists and help hopefully reach those communities that might not otherwise be able to access these educational resources in other ways. So we're really excited to have different mentors on each week and break down those barriers to help everybody get these resources. And we have a Facebook community called the Creators Circle. If you haven't joined that yet, we welcome you to do that. And that's where we share a lot of our information and events that are coming up. And then if you want to also join our newsletter on our website, that is where we also send out monthly newsletter information on all of our upcoming events. So welcome again. And Serona Elton is here from the MLC. If you don't know what the MLC is, it's the Mechanical Licensing Collective, and it's based in Nashville. And Serona has extensive experience as a music industry professional and educator, and is also a professor, director of the music industry program at the University of Miami Frost School of Music, and a Yamaha master educator. And she's the head of educational partnerships at the MLC right now. So we're really excited to get talking because I think a lot of people probably don't know what the MLC is or not sure how it can help them as songwriters and artists. So this will be a really great workshop, and we'll have it offered on our website as a replay after as well. And everybody, I think today what we're going to do is just keep the questions for the end. So if you want to pop questions in the chat during the call, that's fine, and I'll just hold them until the end, and we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the call to bring you on if you'd like to ask them, or we can read them off. So welcome, Serona. If you want to jump on, you're welcome to.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and congrats on your 501(c)(3) status. Hello, everybody. And so Jordan already told you, I am the head of educational partnerships at the Mechanical Licensing Collective, or the MLC for short. Mechanical Licensing Collective is a mouthful. And so what I have for you today is a presentation. I'm going to share my screen with some slides because we have found that visual aids do help the conversation when it comes to explaining what mechanical licenses are, what the MLC does. And so we're going to go through those, but then we will have time for questions at the end. But hopefully I'll knock a lot of them out with the presentation. So let me go ahead and share my screen, jump right into that now. Okay, there we go. And Jordan will let me know if you're not able to see the screen. Hopefully you're good. All right, so let's just, great, awesome. Okay, so let's jump in. What is the MLC? So at sort of the, bird's eye view, right? The high level, just summarize it as fast as you possibly can for me. If you just look at the visual without reading any words on the slide, you can see the MLC has money going into it and flowing out of it. It sits right in the middle of a flow of money. And that money comes from certain types of digital music providers. We're going to talk about what we mean by that. That type of money is called mechanical royalties. We're going to talk about what that means. And then the MLC collects those mechanical royalties from certain types of digital providers and pays those royalties out to certain rights holders. And we're going to talk about which rights holders. So we're going to dive very deeply into each piece of this initial diagram. It's important to know that the MLC is the only company authorized by the U.S. Copyright Office to administer this particular kind of royalties. And so for the most part, either we're paying you or we're paying somebody who's paying you if you are a rights holder entitled to this money. So we're going to talk all about, what this money is, who we distribute it to, how it's distributed, how far back in time it goes, all of that stuff we're going to dive into in this presentation. So before we actually get too deep into the MLC and mechanicals, we want to start actually with a quick recap of a couple of key copyright basics that are really important to understand before you can understand what we do. So first is, I want to make sure everybody understands the difference between songs and compositions as opposed to recordings, right? So let's start with songs or compositions. The copyright law calls these musical works, and often in MLC materials and on our website and in our portals, you might see us refer to works. In other words, songs, right? Some people call them songs, some call them compositions, generally based on the genre you work in. But we're talking about musical works. These are created by songwriters or composers and lyricists, often administered by music publishers or publishing administrators, right? And we're talking about the underlying music, the melody, the rhythm, the harmony that could be expressed in a system of musical notation if you wanted to, right? You could literally take a musical work and put it on staff paper and little musical notes and hand it to a musician to play. Right? That's what a musical work is. A great example we like to start with and build on is the song called Yesterday, written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney. We're going to come back to that in a second. That is separate and different from a sound recording, right? The copyright law calls audio recordings sound recordings. These are typically created by recording artists, maybe with some also backing musicians, the help of a producer, usually distributed by record companies, right? And by the way, a sound recording is also separate from a video, right? Which the copyright law calls an audiovisual work. So those are three separate works that are recognized by the US copyright law: musical work, sound recording, audiovisual work. And part of what makes the music industry so complicated is that we have what I call nested copyrights. So imagine you're watching a music video of your favorite artist. What you're watching are three copyrights in action. You have the video, and nested within that is the sound recording, and nested within that is the work. And each of those involve different rights, usually different rights holders. The licensing process for each of those is different. The royalties that are paid for each of those is different. And so if we were to analyze a music video, we'd almost have to do three parts to our analysis because of all those nested copyrights. So building on that example, that song Yesterday was first performed and recorded by the Beatles, but then it was also recorded by Elvis Presley, Frank Sinatra, Aretha Franklin, and hundreds of other artists. In fact, it's one of the most recorded songs of all times, or what we call the most covered songs, right? So the Beatles was the original recording, and then all those other recordings, we like to call them cover records. You actually won't find that term in the copyright law, but it's just something we say in the music industry. But what that gives us is an opportunity to start to highlight this a one-to-many relationship, perhaps, right? So imagine you have that song Yesterday by John Lennon and Paul McCartney. You have the Beatles recording, but then you have Frank Sinatra's recording, Aretha Franklin's recording, Elvis Presley, and so on, right? All those recordings have to map back to that underlying song in order for the song rights holders to get paid. And we call this matching. We're going to come back to that topic in more detail in a few minutes, but matching up these sound recordings back to their original musical work is a really important part of what we do in order to pay people. So another quick refresher recap of something you probably know already, a little bit of music industry terminology. The way we talk about different kinds of licenses in the music industry can actually be related back to certain rights that are granted by the copyright law to the owner of a copyright. So if you are the owner of a musical work copyright, there are actually 5 exclusive rights that you have. There's 6 listed, but the 6th only applies to sound recordings. If you are a musical works copyright owner, there are 5 different rights you have. And those rights can be connected to different kinds of uses of music and the terminology we use. So when we're talking about mechanical licenses and mechanical rights in the United States, when we use that term, we're talking about specifically the reproduction right and the distribution right to take a musical work, embed it within a sound recording, an audio sound recording, and then make that recording available as a physical record or a digital record. And we'll talk more about digital records in a minute. But so mechanicals is reproduction and distribution. That is separate from a different right that you also have as a copyright owner, which is the right over public performance. Right. And so public performance involves a performance license, like the kinds of licenses that people get from ASCAP and BMI. Right. And that's a separate right. Performance is separate than reproduction and distribution. And what you're going to see, we're going to build on this, performance royalties are separate from mechanical royalties, and they all relate back to rights. So this is just a bit of a recap, refresher, and you'll see where this plays a role in a few more minutes. Let's build a bit more about that reproduction distribution and what I mean by physical and digital records, okay? So historically, right, I'm going to take off something that I think is making a lot of noise here, okay? Historically, record labels have always had to obtain a mechanical license in order to put out physical records. And that's been the case since 1909. And it's still the case today. Record labels still need to get a mechanical license from the music publisher, generally speaking, or whoever the copyright owner or administrator is of that musical work. A record label needs a mechanical license, and then they have to pay mechanical royalties if they're going to put physical products like vinyl and CDs into the marketplace. Then we move forward a little bit in time, and this new thing called downloads came around. And downloads are also considered a reproduction and distribution. And in the US, the model was that the record label would secure the mechanical license for the download. And then they would do something called a pass-through license and use that permission to authorize a digital download service like iTunes to make the music available. And so the model we've had and still have for most downloads is a service, let's just say iTunes or Amazon Music or whoever is selling downloads today. Generally, that model is that digital service sells it to the consumer. They pay the resulting money back to the record distributor and the record label, and the record label has the obligation for the mechanical royalty. It's different outside of the United States. It's worth just saying for a minute, outside of the United States, for downloads, the model has always been that the digital service has to get the mechanical license. But in the US, for downloads, from the time they started, the model always was that the record label would get that license, which made sense. It was easy enough to just add it on to their physical mechanical license when downloads first came around, and the record label has that obligation. Then we moved into the streaming era. So let's take a pause for a second and dive a little deeply into the concept of streaming. There are different kinds of streaming. Consumers like to just say streaming, like it's all the same. But if you're a music industry insider, which you all are now, whether you want to be or not, you have to learn that actually there's two different kinds of streaming. There's interactive streaming and non-interactive streaming. The reason we care about this distinction is that they involve different rights, different kinds of licenses. The licensing process is different. The royalties are different. So interactive streaming, we sometimes call it on-demand streaming. And in that kind of streaming, the user of the platform, the user of Spotify, the user of Apple Music, you get to pick exactly what you're going to listen to. You can go find that song, your favorite track on there, press play it 10 times. You're in control, right? You have choices yours. With non-interactive streaming, it's basically like digital radio. You can pick the station or the channel or the playlist, but you don't get to pick exactly what recording you listen to. You might get a few little options. Maybe you can skip something, right? Or you can give like thumbs up or thumbs down. And if you say thumbs down, maybe it won't give you any more of that. but you're not in complete control like you are with interactive streaming. So interactive streaming, the user is in charge. Non-interactive streaming is much more passive kind of listening experience, like digital radio. And the way these get treated from a rights and a royalties perspective, interactive streaming, because the user is in control, it's more like a download or the purchase of a physical item, whereas non-interactive streaming is more like radio airplay and performance. And so we have to make a distinction between different kinds of streaming. Limited downloads are something that, they happen in the background, but most people don't even know about them. And we're actually almost at the point where it's not even worth mentioning them. But when you, let's say you're on Spotify and you want to have your playlist and you're going to go on a flight across the country and you don't want to pay for Wi-Fi on the plane and it's not free, right? So you have no cell service and no Wi-Fi up in the air. So how is it that you can still stream your favorite playlist on Spotify? Well, if you toggled that button that said you wanted that music available for offline listening, what technically happens in the background is that music is downloaded to your device, but it doesn't behave like a permanent download. It's very limited in your ability to access it. And so for licensing purposes and royalty purposes, limited downloads get lumped together with interactive streaming, like all one bucket, okay? They're just sort of there to enable offline streaming, if that makes sense. And so services like Spotify and Apple Music need mechanical licenses and pay mechanical royalties. Services like Pandora Premium, which is not the same as Pandora Radio. And this can get crazy confusing, right? Even Apple has Beats Radio, which is digital radio, right? So the name of the company by itself doesn't necessarily tell you what kind of service offering it's doing, right? Because Pandora has several different kinds, one of which, the one you probably are most familiar with, is Pandora Radio, the radio model, right? But Pandora also offers something called Pandora Premium that competes directly with Spotify because it is interactive, right? So if a service is operating an interactive audio streaming service in the United States, they need a mechanical license, just like record labels do. To put out physical products, those services need a mechanical license to make music available for interactive streaming and limited downloads. All right, let's keep building. So this is a diagram on our website. I'm going to introduce you to it, but we're not going to go over it all because we could take up the whole time on that. I will say there is also, where this is found on our website, is a link to a video that we did make of a webinar where we focused only on this. So there is a 30-minute video there that you could watch if you wanted to go deep into this. But people really like this diagram. Let me just give you an introduction to it. What this diagram shows is the flow of royalties for the use of audio-only uses of music digitally in the United States, okay? And to start with, you have to start by looking at the legend up in the top right. That legend tells you for the 4 different types of digital uses, interactive streaming and limited downloads, permanent downloads, and non-interactive streaming, for those 4 different kinds of uses, which of these 4 flows of money happen? And what you can see for all of them is that they all involve 2 or more flows. And that's because some money flows to the rights holders of the musical works, some money flows to the rights holders of the sound recording, right? You probably just know intuitively that if you're listening to a recording on Spotify, the songwriters are getting paid, the publisher's getting paid, the artist, the producer, the label are getting paid, right? So in all of these cases, you have some money going to the publishing side of the business, some money going to the recording side of the business, right? So those little symbols, 1, 2, 3, and 4, tell you which of these flows is involved. So for example, interactive streams is on the top row in the legend. When as a stream on Spotify, it generates 3 sets of royalties. It's not either or, it's all 3, 1 and 2 and 3. 3 sets of royalties are created by one stream on Spotify, okay? So then the left half of the screen, columns 1 and 2, has to do with songs or musical works, right? That's money that flows to the publishers and the writers. The right half of the screen, columns 3 and 4, is money that flows to the recording artist, the record label, the producer, okay? And so looking at that Spotify example of an interactive stream, that generates one, public performance money that goes to those PROs. And by the way, we just added a new one to our diagram called All Track. You could check them out. That money flows to the PROs, and then the PRO model is that they pay basically half of the money to the publisher, half of the money to the songwriter, right? And if you are acting as your own publisher, you're getting both. You're getting all that money. Number 2 is the mechanical royalty. A stream on Spotify generates both a performance royalty and a mechanical royalty, both. So that the number 2 money goes from Spotify to the MLC, and then the MLC model, the mechanicals model, is a little different. Generally speaking, we pay music publishers. But for songwriters who are acting as their own music publisher or their own publishing administrator, we pay them because they're acting like the publisher. But for songwriters who are signed up with a publisher or a publishing administrator, we pay the publisher or the publishing administrator, and then they pay the songwriter. It's a slightly different model than with PROs. And we're going to dive more deeply into that in a few more slides. And the third set of money generated by that one stream on Spotify is column number 3. That is Spotify paying Sony Music or DistroKid or CD Baby, right? And then they pay the record labels, the artists and the producers, or like if it's CD Baby, Spotify pays CD Baby pays that independent artist that is signed up with CD Baby, right? So if you happen to be the sole songwriter and the artist of that same song, you should be getting paid 3 ways for that stream on Spotify. Both parts from the PRO, publisher and writer share, all of the money from the MLC because you're acting as the publisher, and that number 3 money from your record distributor if you're also the recording artist. Contrasting that for a second with a non-interactive stream, like on Pandora Radio or Sirius XM satellite radio, that involves only 1 and 4. There is no mechanical involved in non-interactive streaming because it's just a performance only. It's not also a reproduction and distribution. So for Pandora Radio or Sirius XM Radio, they pay the PROs and they pay Sound Exchange, not the record distributor. They pay Sound Exchange, and then Sound Exchange pays half of the money to the copyright owner of the sound recording, 45% of the money to the featured recording artist, and 5% of the money to a fund that pays that money out to the non-featured artists. So if you are a recording artist, you should, an independent recording artist doing it yourself, you have to be signed up with a distributor, CD Baby, DistroKid, there's so many others, but you also need to be signed up with Sound Exchange as both the recording artist and as the sound recording copyright owner. Right. And so this diagram, it's on our website under themlc.com is our website. And then there's a section called resources. And then it says digital music royalties. And then you can take as long as you like with this diagram. But people really they've found it quite helpful. Okay, so why are we here? Okay, this sounds like what's new about this? Why is there MLC here? We are here because of a change in the US copyright law. In 2018, there was a law passed called the Music Modernization Act, and it changed some of what was already in the copyright law in some really important ways. That MMA actually had 3 different titles or 3 different sections to it. One part was focused on how digital mechanical licensing works. There were 2 other really important parts of the MMA that have nothing to do with what we do. So the whole MMA was not about us, just 1/3 of it. So that first part of the MMA, what it did was 3 really critical things. It firstly changed the overall model for how digital mechanical licensing was done in the United States. It created something called a blanket compulsory mechanical license. Before this change, what was happening was all mechanical licensing was done on what we call a work by work basis, which means that the party needing the license, like the record label or the digital service, because with streaming, the service has to get the license. Whereas for physical products, it's the record label. And for most downloads, they've still chosen to stick with the record label model, although they could move to this. The model looks more like streaming from a who gets the license perspective. But the work by work model meant that the party needing the license would have to research who all the publishers are of the song that recording was made of, and then would have to contact them and either ask for a license, or if the work was eligible for something called a compulsory license, they would have to send them notice. Well, Spotify now gets almost 100,000, if not more, 100,000 new recordings uploaded every day. It wasn't quite that high back in 2018, but it was more than 50,000 tracks being uploaded every day to Spotify. And all those tracks were also uploaded every day to Apple Music and to Pandora Premium and to Amazon Music. And each one of those services was having to research and try and find out all the publishers and then contact them all for licenses. That was not working. That model did not work. The work by work model worked for record labels. It was not working at scale for big digital music services. And so the law said, okay, we're going to change up the mechanism here, the process for digital services, and create a blanket license, which means that the service only needs to get one mechanical license. Just like Spotify only has one license from ASCAP and one from BMI, it doesn't have one for each work. It has a blanket license from those organizations. The law changed and said, now Spotify, you can get one mechanical license. But whenever you have that blanket licensing model, you have to have a central organization that administers it. And by administer, that means collects the royalties and pays the royalties out, and takes care of paperwork and various licensing kind of, official notices that have to be filed by that party getting the license. So the law said there must be created a mechanical licensing collective. In case you thought we just picked that name because it's like so nifty and rolls off the tongue so easily, the law said there will be a mechanical licensing collective created. And it also said this new MLC needs to have a publicly available database of musical works ownership information for all to see, super transparent. Who are the owners or administrators of this musical work and what are their shares? And that was required by law. And so here we are, right? That's why we are here. So one of the things we like to do is, I'm going to recap what it is that we do, but I'm also going to tell you what we don't do. The reason we do that is, we're the new kid on the block, and it's so easy for people to get confused and say, so wait, if I'm signed up with the MLC, I don't need ASCAP anymore? No, that's wrong. ASCAP still does what it does, right? So we'll tell you what we do, but there's things that we don't do that you as a creator, either a songwriter or an artist, you need to go take care of, or else you're missing out on your money, right? We don't want you to think that money's flowing through us and then be surprised when it isn't, because we have a very narrow focus. The law says we can do this thing, but it also says we can only do that thing. We can't just expand willy-nilly. We're not allowed to by the law. So let's cover, what we do, and what we don't do. All right, so we have this public database on our website. Anybody can search it. You go to the MLC.com, in the top right, it says public search. You can search to your heart's content. It's there, it's been there since we were operational. The second thing is we administer this blanket license, okay? So a couple of key things about this blanket license. It is a mechanical license, not a performance license, right? It's a mechanical license, and it's available to eligible digital audio services. And by that, I mean services offering interactive streams and limited downloads, operating in the United States. The US copyright law can only grant a license that applies within the United States. The law in France governs what happens in France. The law in the UK governs what happens in the UK. And by law, we are not allowed to collect royalties from overseas. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So this blanket license only applies to services in the United States. Spotify in France needs to sort out its license in France to operate in France. Okay. What we spend the bulk of our time doing And this involves computers and, machine learning and human beings, is matching, right? Matching. So what happens is a service like Spotify will report to us that stream, that the recording by Aretha Franklin of yesterday was streamed X many times in the month of February. We have to match that Aretha Franklin recording of yesterday back to that song yesterday written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, right? And we also have to match the Elvis Presley one back to that. And we have to match the Beatles one back to that, right? So that matching, that taking the recording information sent to us by the digital services and matching it back to its related musical work, we call that matching. And that's where, that's the heavy lifting. That's what we do. And we have a very good match rate of more than 84% right now, which is actually compared to how others that do this, because ASCAP needs to do matching, and mechanical rights societies in other countries around the world, everybody's doing matching. That's a very high match rate, but we always want it to be higher. So we match this data and we collect mechanical royalties from those digital services, match the recording to the work, and pay those royalties out to the rights holders, right? That's what we do all the time, all day, every day. That's what we're here for. What do we not do? We have nothing to do with performance royalties. We do not replace ASCAP or BMI or any of them. What they do, they do. That's awesome. We do what we do. It's separate. It's completely separate. So if you need to register, if it turns out you need to be a member of the MLC, which is what we're going to talk about next, you need to register your works with your PRO and with the MLC. It's not one-stop shopping. Sorry, but it's separate. You don't change anything about what you're doing with your PRO. Leave that alone, okay? We have nothing to do with digital performance royalties for sound recordings and what Sound Exchange does. Totally separate than us. Registration is separate. You register sound recordings with Sound Exchange as a recording artist or a copyright owner of a sound recording. What they do is amazing. They're awesome. They do what they do. What we do is separate, totally separate, okay? We have nothing to do with mechanical royalties for physical products. We're not allowed by law to be involved in physical product mechanical licensing. So whatever you've been doing to get that from record labels, that can't change. We have nothing to do with video. Video does not involve a mechanical license. Video involves a synchronization license and sometimes also a performance license. Like if it's on YouTube or TikTok, there's a performance license involved. We are not involved in video at all. That is not a mechanical, it's a synchronization license, not something we do. So YouTube videos, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, not us. That money does not flow through us. And we're not allowed by law to collect mechanical royalties from overseas. So if you are entitled to mechanical royalties from overseas, there's other things you have to do to collect that money. And we could talk about that in a few minutes, but that's not flowing through the MLC. We're not allowed by law to help with that. All right, don't worry, we're almost done with the presentation. Public search, as I mentioned, go to the website, have fun searching, all good. Who should become a member of the MLC? Okay, so music publishers who handle their publishing administration in the United States need to become members of the MLC. Publishing administrators become members of the MLC. So for example, Song Trust is a publishing administrator, they're a member of the MLC. CD Baby Pro Publishing is a publishing administrator, member of the MLC. TuneCore Pro Publishing, right? Publishing administrators are members of the MLC. There are mechanical rights organizations that are like us, but based in other countries. They also become members of the MLC because they are allowed to collect royalties from the use of their members' musical works in the United States, and we pay that money out. We send that money overseas to them. That's okay. We're not allowed to collect from them, however. Then the last category are songwriters, composers, and lyricists. And this is where it depends. Some should be, some shouldn't be. Quick recap on some little terminology we like to use. We have a catchphrase called connect to collect. That just means connect with us to collect your mechanical royalties. And play your part is a little catchphrase that means to register your works that you administer. So we don't separate out writer share and publisher share like PROs do. Really, the mechanicals, around the world, mechanical rights societies pay 100% of the money to the music publisher. And then the publisher pays the songwriter based on the contract between them, okay? However, we've got lots of songwriters who are their own publishers. So if you are a songwriter and you self-administer any of your songs, which means that you are responsible for registering those works with societies and collecting those royalties, then you should become a member of the MLC and you'll register those works that you administer with us. And that is separate and in addition to anything you do with your PRO. And if you happen to be a recording artist, that's separate and in addition to anything you do with Sound Exchange. If, however, you are a songwriter and all of your works are administered by a publisher or a publishing administrator, so let's say you're a songwriter and you are signed to Sony Music Publishing. They handle this. They collect from us, they will pay you. Let's say you're a songwriter and you signed up with Songtrust to be your administrator. We pay Songtrust, Songtrust pays you. Let's say you signed up with CD Baby Pro Publishing. That is separate from CD Baby sound recording distribution. If you signed up for publishing administration with CD Baby Pro Publishing, we pay them, they pay you, right? So it's about publishing administration. We pay the publishing administrator. For all songwriters, your default position is that you are the administrator and the publisher. It starts that way. And it stays that way until you agree to hire or sign a contract with somebody else authorizing them to do that for you. So if you don't know if you're self-administered, if you've never signed up anything with anybody, you are self-administered. That's the default position. And that only changes if you then sign up with somebody. And by the way, it's fine if that changes later and you join us, but then later you decide to get an administrator involved. That's no problem. There's something called a letter of direction that redirects us to pay them instead of you directly, or vice versa. You leave your publishing administrator and now you want to be paid directly. Song catalog administration moves around the industry all the time. There's no problem with that. Things change all the time. So it doesn't have to be a permanent answer, but it's who is responsible for administering this song right now. And by the way, it does not have to be every single song you've ever written. This is really about songs that have been written and then recorded and are going to be or are on digital services in the United States, right? It doesn't have to be everything you've ever written. There's no point in registering anything you've ever written with anybody if it's never been recorded. It will never be used. That's separate than the Copyright Office. That's a different registration, but I'm talking about with collective rights management organizations. Okay, although I will also say, if you are somebody who is signed up with a publishing administrator, we still encourage you, look in the public search, see if your works are there, make sure they're there with the correct share and your administrator listed. If not, you should be knocking on the door of your administrator going, hey, what the heck? I checked the database, my works aren't there. What are you waiting for, right? So public search is still there for everybody. Okay, almost done. Membership is totally free. There is no cost. There is no threshold, none of that. It's totally free. You just fill out some stuff online and you're all set. And by the way, a cool little nifty feature of the law is that, and this is very unusual, the digital services have to pay our operating costs separate than the royalties. So if we collect $100 in royalties, we pay out $100 in royalties. And if it's paid late, it includes interest. And our operating costs are paid for separately by the digital services. The law required them to do that, which is unusual. Once you become a member, you have to register your works. We have a variety of member tools to help you do this, to play your part, as we like to say, right? If you don't register and claim your works, we can't pay you. Membership is not enough. You have to actually claim your works. And there's ways to do that. We have some starter data in our database because we had to get up and running really quickly. We purchased some industry databases so that we had some starter data. And so if you're brand new to the MLC, what we say is first search in our database to see if we kind of have like the starter data for your work, and then fill in the rest of it, enter your claim, get it all nice and tidied up so we can pay you. And part of that involves not only setting up your works, but we have this great tool that lets you search for the recording usage information that's reported to us by digital services, search for it, and even like You might see a song that Spotify reported to us that has a title that's the same as your work, but titles are not protected by copyright law, so it could be somebody else's song. You can listen to it in our portal and see if that's actually your song and then claim it if it is. So we have a variety of tools because we don't want to miss any matches. And so, we've empowered our members to help us with those matches to make sure that nothing gets missed, matching those sound recordings of your works back to your works. So lots of tools for our members. We pay royalties on a monthly basis, which is also a bit unusual. We're happy about this. There is a lag time from when the stream happens. Let's say a stream happens in January, that ends up on a royalty statement in mid-April. There's a whole lot happening during that time period. The digital service can't even begin to start reporting to us and paying us until after that month is completely finished, based on the way the royalties are calculated. And then we have to ingest that data. We're trying to match everything. Once we match, we're calculating how much money is due. We're getting bank transfers ready to move that money into your bank account. So all this happens over like a 75-day lag. But if you finally get around to hearing about us and you set up your works, it's okay. You haven't lost out on that money. Every month, we're also trying to match everything we couldn't match the prior month, right? But it just means there is a lag before you'll actually see it on a royalty statement. So let's just talk for a second about what time periods we have royalties for. So January 1st, 2021 is a really critical divider, okay? That's when this new blanket license went into effect. Before that, it was a work by work model. So from January 1st, 2021, digital services have all had to start reporting all their royalties to us. And we started paying that out in April 2021. And we've been paying it out monthly ever since, right? And so for sure, if you've got a new recording that just, a new recording of your work that just came out, that money's being reported to us and we stand ready to pay you. But what the law also said, remember, we got this change in the law because it wasn't working well. So what the law said to those services was, hey, as of January 1st, 2021, if as of like December 31st, 2020, you still had royalties, mechanical royalties that you never paid out because you couldn't match them, you can transfer all that money and all that data to the MLC and avoid getting sued for not paying it. So many DSPs, I have the number on the next slide, transferred more than $420 million to the MLC, and we call that historical unmatched. In some cases, that goes back all the way to 2007 for these services. And we've been busy matching and paying those royalties out. We started finally being able to start pay some of that last summer, a year ago this month. And so on royalty statements, some royalties are marked with an H for or HU for historical unmatched. They go way back in time. And others are marked with a B because they are from January 1st, 2021 and forward, right? The good news is, as of now, it's not too late for you to get everything that you may have never been paid before. There will come a time, we're not there yet. And when that time comes, we will scream it from rooftops everywhere and ads and social media. And we'll be like, last call, everybody, last call, because there will come a time where you will only be able to go back 3 years. And money older than 3 years gets paid out to all of our members on a proportional basis relative to how much they got originally during that time period. So it does mean the big publishers are going to get more money. The little publishers and self-administered songwriters will get little money, but it's going to be done on a proportional basis. But then you won't be able to go back more than 3 years. We're not there yet. That hasn't happened yet. So you could still go back to 2007 in some cases, but get on it, because there will come a time when it's like last call for 3 years or older, and then it will only be on like a 3-year rolling period. There's a whole page on our website, by the way, dedicated to this topic under how it works, then historical unmatched royalties. So yeah, they transferred 21 DSPs, transferred 427 million to us. Right now, 372 million of that is held up in that we can't pay it out until we get a final rate decision by the Copyright Royalty Board that sets the rates for that 2018 to 2020 There's like a time window we call Phono 3. We can't pay that money out until they get a final rate issued, which we are like waiting for any time now. Once they finally make that decision, then there is, it's going to take some months because the digital services have to pay us the difference based on what they already pay. They'll have to pay more than 427 million. That was paid using some estimated rates. They will owe us extra money, and we can't pay out the money till we get that extra money. But all this will be on our historical unmatched page. The 55 million is what we've been working on paying out and have been now for a year. Okay, so lastly, whatever questions I can't answer now, we have great help team available. They answer the telephone. People are like, wait a minute, like you're not a robot, you're a human being. They're real human beings. Most of them are based in Nashville. They answer the phone Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Central Time. They also will respond to live chat during that time in our portal. If you are a member, you're logged into the portal, you can initiate a live chat with them. And you can always 24/7 initiate an email inquiry to us, whether you're a member or not a member, if you're not clear on if you should be a member, and they will help you. We also have a bunch of other resources and frequently asked questions on our website and a YouTube channel with lots of instructional videos. These are our social media handles. Do follow us. We announce webinars. We also announce when we're hiring. If any of you are music industry folks who actually want to work for someone like us, we will be announcing that last call for royalties when the time comes. But we also announce all kinds of stuff. So definitely follow us on social media. So now I'm going to come out of screen share. And I'm going to throw on my reading glasses so I can see the questions in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you. That was so informative. Thank you so much for all that. I have had questions about the MLC too, so I'm very excited that this is all answered now.
Awesome.
I see that Stephanie has a question. If you don't mind just doing some questions before we end the call, is that all right?
Yeah, definitely. And then we can do raised hands and some in the chat. You can decide how to ping pong back and forth.
Awesome. Cool. So Stephanie, I'm going to ask you to unmute if you want to come ask your question on screen.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's a lot being like an independent songwriter. So thank you, Pandion, and thank you so much for being here and like trying to get everyone educated about this. I'm sure it is a chore. I don't want to bogart everyone's time, but I have a particular to me situation that maybe will help someone else if they're in a similar situation. I'm just over here like writing some songs, doing this all by myself. And I went to the Taxi conference, which is for like singer-songwriters, in November, and I was told at that about the like, hey, everyone's gonna get a chunk of this share, you know, at some point, like what you're referring to, like you can't go back in time, so get into the MLC. But I was told that you can't sign up for the MLC unless you also have publishing. And I originally registered with my PRO with BMI because I was told at the beginning of my like songwriting sync journey that the publishing goes to the writer's share with BMI. So last week with Pandion, we had a publishing discussion. And so after that discussion, I I emailed BMI and basically I'm trying to backtrack my registered songs and say, can you revise these to reflect the publishing company or entity that I've established since? So my question for you is, do I have to wait for BMI to revise those before I can register the song? I have a song that's like almost has 300,000 streams, and it's
no, you do not have to wait. You don't have to wait at all.
Okay.
You don't at all. So you have a choice. You can sign up with the MLC as just Stephanie Wright, and that's whose name will be listed as the 100% claiming those songs.
Got it.
Or you can register right now because it sounds like you have created your publishing company with BMI, right? It doesn't have to even be a legal company, but you've created your publisher name with BMI, yes, right? And it has its own unique identifier. Your publisher will have a name and an IPI.
Yes.
What's the better course of action? And you do not have to wait for them to do anything, okay? But because you have set up that BMI publisher, the more appropriate thing is join the MLC right now as that publisher, because that's who you want to appear in our database as the publishing party with 100% claim for those works. But you don't have to wait for BMI to update your catalog. And let's say you'd never even signed up with BMI, you could just sign up now as Stephanie Wright, get your songs in there, and then you could come to us in a month and say, hey, I want to change from Stephanie Wright to Write Songs, making that up, because now that's my publishing entity. So I want to switch from it being a personal thing to a publisher thing. No problem. So you do not have to wait for anything. There's no threshold for the MLC. And if things change, like maybe you didn't have a publishing entity and now you do, that's no problem. We can update the data. So what I would do, like right now, BMI will take however long they take. That's a completely separate matter. Go ahead, join the MLC as your publishing entity. Great. Get your songs registered, use our tools, make sure that sound recording of that work is matched up, and then you'll get paid.
And is that like, so if I released a song last year, is there just monies like waiting to be like, claim me? Okay, excellent. Exactly. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
No problem. Great question.
Stephanie. Yeah, that was a great question. Yeah, because it can be confusing with the differentiating between what PROs are doing and what you're doing. So that's really helpful to know. Great. Does anyone else have any questions? Feel free to pop them in the chat, raise your hand.
Now's your chance. No question is too small.
I have a question.
Yes,
I have a question. Hi. You said that the matching rate was 84% for
about that right now, yes.
The automatic. So my question is, if you fall into the category of being unmatched, but you know that you are due some money, how easy is it to get in contact with the MLC, and what does that process look like?
So a couple of things. So firstly, if I'm assuming based on the way you phrased the question that you are the party entitled to collect this money, right?
Yeah.
So you need to be a member of the MLC. You don't have to contact us. You can, but you don't have to. We've given you the tools. So what happens is you log into the member portal, you go in, you make sure your work is there, right? Let's say you wrote a song, called whatever, Wednesdays Are Great, okay? Make sure your song's there, it's 100% claimed. Now there's something you access yourself directly on the portal called our matching tool. You go into the matching tool, you search for, let's say that sound recording is also called Wednesdays Are Great. You search for the title, Wednesdays Are Great. It's going to show you, because if it has never been matched, you're going to see it there in the unmatched. And you're going to go, I want to make sure that that's my Wednesdays Are Great, because, that's a common title. So click on play, you listen, you're like, that's mine. You click a button that says submit the match. Right there. Excellent. It gets reviewed by the MLC team to make sure that you're not like a bad actor, just clicking, like all kinds of stuff that's not yours. So it doesn't happen instantaneously, but it gets submitted, assuming it's all legit. They will match it in the background. The royalties flow to your next statement. So you don't have to contact them. If you run into problems when that's happening, you can contact us, but you don't have to contact us. You can do all that yourself on the screen.
Okay. I've registered, but I haven't registered my work, so that's the next thing.
Yes.
Thank you.
I will say also, I saw in the chat a question about the slides. We don't give out the slides, but the video is going to be available, and we've done the slides that you saw are part of our standard. So if you know anybody who wants to get the same thing but live, about once a month we do a What is the MLC webinar that the MLC puts out, and that's the presentation you just saw as well. And there's some videos of that on our YouTube channel. So there's lots of ways to get to this, and a lot of that information is on our website already as well in different places.
Great.
Great, thank you.
Cool. If you don't mind, maybe just one more question here.
Sure.
The first one, and then also we'll have, so everybody, we're doing our Ask Me Anything again on the Creator Circle. So if you have lingering questions, we can get to them there. But Stephanie asked a couple more here.
Yeah, I see a few others here in the chat. I can try and knock them off quickly.
Cool.
Yeah. So Stephanie said, is there any chance someone else could wrongly claim it? Yes, somebody could, and that's okay. I mean, it happens. If somebody else has claimed your song, let's say I went to go and type in my song, Wednesdays Are Great, and I'm like, somebody else has already, what? You can launch a dispute with the MLC. We don't resolve disputes. We don't have legal authority to say whose it is or isn't, right? But we'll put it on hold, and then you can deal with the person that's, if they really are like, no, that's really mine, and you have to fight it out with them. But it can, I mean, it can happen. And sometimes they're legit, like you guys co-wrote it and you're like, it's mine. No, it's mine. And you guys will have to fight it out. So they do not need to be registered with the US Copyright Office in order to claim. There is no requirement that you register anything with anybody else other than to do it with us. You should register with your PRO. You should register with the Copyright Office. If you're an artist, you should sign up a sound exchange. You should do all those things, but you do not have to. It's not a threshold requirement. Deborah said, on a co-write, do all parties have to be MLC members? No. You will only register your claim. So let's say that Stephanie and I co-wrote that song, Wednesdays Are Wonderful, whatever I said it was. And I'm on the ball. I become an MLC member and I claim 50%. I'm going to get my money. Doesn't matter if Stephanie never gets on with her business. Okay. So no, they don't have to be members. They don't have to register, just register only your claim. It's also wrong for me to register Stephanie's claim. Only your own, only your own. Anelda said, if you're signed with a sync agent, do they collect through the MLC? So sync is completely different. Sync is nothing to do with the MLC, nothing to do with mechanicals. Separate matter, completely separate matter, separate matter. Does ASCAP control publishing? ASCAP is a performing rights organization that collects a certain type of royalties on behalf of publishers and songwriters. That question maybe belies a much bigger question we won't have time to get into, but it sounds like there might have been a great webinar last week that might dive into that. And then last one, maybe Kevin says, what if there's more than one publisher? Like I said, me and Stephanie would both register our respective shares, claim our share, and we're golden. Most songs have more than one publisher, frankly.
Great. Okay,
right.
well, that's the end of our time. Thank you so much. I cannot thank you enough for all this information, Serona. Thank you.
Thank you for the chance.
Everyone for the questions too. And if you have any other questions lingering, go on our Facebook Creator Circle group and we can get those answered. Yeah, so thank you, everybody.
Right.
And
Thank you,
Serona,
everyone.
again. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye.